Ensler. You know Eve Ensler, right? She's the woman who wrote the Vagina Monologues. She is a fierce defender of women's rights around the world and also a cancer survivor. The following passage is taken from her memoir, and in this part of her story, she is at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester receiving chemotherapy for some pretty invasive cancer. And in this part of her story, she is not sure if she's going to beat it. From her bed, she notices a tree outside her window. She writes, "I was too weak to think or write or call or even watch a movie. All I could do was stare at the tree, which was the only thing in my view. At first it annoyed me and I thought I would go mad from boredom, but after the first days and many hours, I began to see the tree. On Tuesday, I meditated on bark. On Friday, the green leaves shimmering in late afternoon light. For hours, I lost myself, my body, my being, dissolving into tree. I was raised in America," Eve writes. "All value lies in the future, in the dream, in production. There is no present tense. There is no value in what is, only in what might be made or exploited from what already exists. Of course, the same was true for me. I had no inherent value. Without work or effort, without making myself into something significant, without proving my worth, I had no right or reason to be here. Life itself was inconsequential unless it led to something. Unless tree would be wood, would be house, would be table, what value was there to tree? So to actually lie in my hospital bed and see the tree, enter the tree, to find the green life inherent in the tree, this was the awakening. Each morning I opened my eyes. I could not wait to focus on tree. I would let tree take me. Each day it was different, based on the light or wind or rain. Tree was a tonic and a cure, a guru and a teaching. I was not writing or producing or on the phone or making anything happen. I was not contributing much more than my appreciation of tree, my love of green, my commitment to trunk and bark, my celebration of branch, my insane delight over the gentle white May blossoms that were beginning to flower everywhere. Now is the time. So this month we are talking about presence, about being a community of presence. And since that means at least two things, we are taking this subject on in two parts. Later this month we'll be talking about presence as in the presence of the holy. But today, we're delving into this idea of presence as in being present. What does it mean to be a community of presence? How are we showing up for each other? How are we showing up for our life? How are we showing up for this moment? Poet Mary Oliver says, "This is the first, the wildest, and the wisest thing I know, that the soul exists and is built entirely out of attentiveness." So, are we paying attention? Are we being attentive? Are we present? To work on presence is helpful in our own spirituality, but it's also helpful to how we show up in the world. Inspirational speaker Mastin Kipp asks, at the end of the day, do others feel loved in your presence? That is the spiritual bottom line. And spiritual leader Thich Nhat Hanh says, when you love someone, the best thing you can offer is your presence. How can you love if you're not there? The most precious gift we can offer others is our presence. When mindfulness embraces those we love, he says, they will bloom like flowers. We don't always make that connection that what we practice in our own spiritual practices, coming back to the breath and meditation, taking in the beauty of the trees, or coming into the rhythm of the waves at the beach, the attentiveness of lighting a candle on our altar, all of this is preparing us for being present. Not just for our own spiritual moments, but also for each other. It's all connected. Returning to the breath on the meditation cushion helps us later when we are in a heated conversation and suddenly we remember that we can take a deep breath before responding, even if we are angry, especially if we are angry. Focusing rituals like lighting a candle during joys and concerns, pouring water during water communion, adding one flower to a vase full of other people's flowers for flower communion, all those spiritual rituals help us to learn attentiveness. They help us to notice things. They help us to focus on one thing at a time. Quieting our minds through prayer each Sunday helps us to quiet our anxieties during the week when we are out in the world and it's starting to become too much for us. Remember how during water communion, I ask you to hold your hand over the water for a moment after you've poured it, to bless the water. It is a blessing. But it's also an extra moment for your soul to become attentive to the water. All the things that we practice to get to that presence of the holy also help us to be present ourselves. We are a few weeks into our winter spirituality series here at the UU Meeting House. And the first two workshops that we offered were on listening, deep listening. On the first day, we all recounted how challenging it can be to stay in the moment when we are talking with someone. We listen to the first part of what someone is saying, but then our mind tunes out to start formulating our own response. Instead of listening all the way through to what is really being said, we change over to what we think is going to be said, and our mind is already racing ahead, jumping to conclusions, putting words in someone else's mouth. We get distracted by the environment or our own thoughts, and we forget to listen at all. Together we brainstormed ways to be better listeners. It was a lot about being present. And we all agreed it takes practice. It takes practice to be a deep listener. But oh, how good it feels to be listened to be heard. If we are really a community of presence, then this is a gift that we can offer one another to truly listen to each other, to truly be present with one another. How many of you have heard of the program Calmer Choice? Some of you? Calmer Choice is a Cape Cod organization that partners with local schools to teach students skills that can help them to be present. Skills to manage stress, control emotions, increase well-being, deal with conflict, and stand up to bullies. Calmer Choice teaches students here on Cape Cod about mindful awareness. Here's how they define mindful awareness. Paying attention in a particular way on purpose to what is happening right now, both internally and externally, with kindness and curiosity. Paying attention in a particular way on purpose to what is happening right now, both internally and externally, with kindness and curiosity. Here is one of the tools that they offer to the students, and thank you to Zoe Wolf for teaching this to us at the Martin Luther King Day event in Wellfleet. You can do this with me. Bring one of your hands up like this, your 5 fingers, and then use the pointer finger of your other hand. What we're going to do is trace our hand, and as we're going up 1 finger, we're going to inhale, and as we go down, we're going to exhale. Okay, so we're going to do that 5 times. Do you feel a little more present? I can feel the change in the energy of the room. Feel free to use that one anytime you need it. It's always there for you. Okay, so why am I talking about all of this now? Presence is a lovely thing to study in worship, yes, but Reverend Kate, have you not noticed what is happening in our country right now? We are in an emergency. Everything is terrible. Everything is frightening. Everything is calling us to do something. Why are you slowing us down? Why are you releasing that energy? Don't we need that chaotic energy to fuel the resistance? Maybe these thoughts have been keeping you from being totally present to this sermon. But here's why I'm talking about presence today. We are going to be much more effective in our resistance if we are a community of presence. If we are a community that knows how to listen to one another. If we are a community that knows how to be there for one another. If we are a community that knows how to breathe before reacting. If we are a community that knows how to slow down, how to center ourselves, how to stand up for ourselves mindfully. I know 2 weeks ago I told you a little bit about the Boston Women's March and how exciting and powerful it was to be there. Here's what I didn't tell you. It was fabulous to be in a crowd of 175,000 people. But it also meant that the crowd was so deep that from where we were standing, we couldn't actually hear any of the speakers. We stood for hours just waiting for the march part to happen. Occasionally, an impatient cheer from the back of the crowd would start up, "March, march, march." But the speeches went on and on. I hear they were really good. And then, finally, hooray, we started marching. But a sea of 175,000 people was trying to get out of a fenced-in Boston Common through gates, sometimes just a few feet wide, onto streets already crowded with march participants. It was time to march, but we weren't going anywhere. You know, this could have been a disaster. Someone could have started pushing, and it would have been chaos. People would have gotten hurt. But just as the crowd was really getting frustrated, a young woman came over the loudspeaker, one of the march organizers. "We were really organized for this march," she told us. "It was all very carefully planned out, and everything is going according to plan. Except that there are 3 times as many of you as we planned for. So you know what? It's going to take a while for you to get onto the march route. It's going to take a very long while. So why don't you go ahead and turn to the people around you and find someone you didn't come with and introduce yourself." And that's what we did. 175,000 people meeting each other. And suddenly we were seeing the crowd with new eyes. We were seeing not just the crowd, but the people in the crowd, the individuals in the crowd. And we were learning their names. A minute before, we were hardly present in our own bodies because we were so focused on where we wanted to be instead. We wanted to be on the other side of the gate. We wanted to be marching. But after that simple invitation, introduce yourself to the person next to you. Listen to them. We became present to where we were and present to each other. It changed the whole feeling of the march for me. The march became a community of presence. And here's another reason why I'm talking about presence today. Dr. Heather Richardson, professor of history at Boston College, has circulated a little warning to all of us this week based on what she knows about behavior and the course of history. What President Trump and Steve Bannon are doing, she says, especially with last week's ban on immigration from 7 predominantly Muslim countries, is creating what is known as a shock event. A successful shock event, she says, depends on speed and chaos because it requires knee-jerk reactions so that people divide along established lines. As society reels and tempers run high, those responsible for the shock event perform a sleight of hand to achieve their real goal, a goal that they know to be hugely unpopular, but from which everyone has been distracted as they fight over the initial event. There's no longer concerted opposition to the real goal. Opposition divides along the partisan lines established by the shock event. This is happening. And what is our best defense against it? Our best defense is not the frantic energy of resistance, although at times that is useful, and I reserve my right to preach periodically from that place. But that frantic energy plays into the shock event. No, our best defense is presence. Being present to what is happening, being present to ourselves and how we are feeling, being present to one another, making our presence known by calling, emailing, showing up. Kazu Haga is a nonviolence trainer based in Oakland, California. He recently wrote a piece called "The Urgency of Slowing Down." He says, yes, we are in an urgent moment in history, and we need to respond accordingly. We need to organize harder than ever, mobilize more people than ever, knock on more doors than ever, and fight like we've never fought before. But as we confront the urgency of the moment, how do we ensure that we are not organizing from a place of panic? When we organize from a place of panic, he explains, our work happens with less mindfulness. We miss steps. We don't have the right information. Our strategies aren't as tight. We react as opposed to respond. We are easier to counter. We make mistakes. We are also much likelier to perpetuate the same systems of violence that we are trying to resist when we work at a frenzied pace. Those with the loudest voices tend to take over, and we often lose the voices of those who are marginalized. We are more likely to emphasize actions over process and relationships, and we begin to distrust each other. Newer activists have a harder time finding a way in, feeding the exclusivity of activism. We are less careful with our messaging, which can turn potential allies away. Haga recently spent some time at the Standing Rock protests in North Dakota. I can still hear the voices of the elders at Standing Rock, he says, reminding us that we need to slow down. That for Indigenous peoples, struggle is nothing new. We've been here before. That for them, everything they do is ceremony, prayer, ritual. And those are not things that you rush. You do it with intention, with all the time and respect that it deserves. The work of social change is stressful on its best days, Haga says. But if we are moving without intention, without mindfulness, and without awareness of how we are moving, it can easily add to what is already a challenge. So what is our work moving into 2017, he asks? Organize, breathe, repeat. Organize, breathe, repeat. Organize, breathe, repeat. Even in moments of great danger, the direction of attention is a choice. Fear can dominate the mind, binding it like a straitjacket, or love can unbind it and open it to resource and opportunity. The soil of the mind can be watered with kindness. The thorns can be removed one by one to appreciate the buds ready to flower. Let's do this one again. Amen, and blessed be.